Ready? And you're all good? Okay. We'll call the meeting to order. Clerk Halinga, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxon,
Present.
Mayor Brown,
Present.
Councilmember Sweet, Councilmember Tucson,
Present.
Councilmember D. Simmons,
Present.
Councilmember J. Simmons, Councilmember King.
Present.
With 5 present and 2 absent, there is a quorum.
Move to excuse the 2 absent council members.
There's support?
Support.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. All right. Well, please rise as you're able for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So I would like to reconsider a vote I made last session for Francis McMullen for the raise.
Okay. Do we have to make the motion first, clerk, or can we just add?
You can add it to the agenda.
Okay.
And it has to be seconded at that
Okay.
time.
Okay. So there's a motion on the floor.
I'll support.
It's been moved and supported. Can we discuss motions to reconsider?
Well, you can, if it's added to the agenda, you just add on the. amended
Okay.
agenda.
So it's been moved and supported, so it'll be added to the agenda as letter, what would that be? G? Okay. G. All right. Any other changes, updates to the agenda? All right. Seeing none, all in favor of the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Now, can someone motion to move us into closed session, please?
I move that we go to closed session.
I second.
Do we have to voice vote that? Roll call, I mean? Okay.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember D. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxon,
Yes.
5 yes and 2 absent. We are adjourning to closed session at 6:33.
All right, to the basement. All right. We'll call the meeting back to order. We need a motion to return to open session, please.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? All right. Thank you all so much for being with us as we return from our closed session. Now is our opportunity for public comment. So you'll have 3 minutes to address council. Please state your name and your address if you feel comfortable, and come up to the podium. So I'll start with the folks in the audience on the list, and then we'll move to Zoom. And so the first person is Washington Osler. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Well, I'm Washington Osler III. I am my residence is 466 South Hamilton Street in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And what else did you say you needed? Was that it? That's
That was
good.
all.
All right. Hello, city officials. So I'm the son of Lee Osler. He wrote the song "Back to Ypsilanti," and it was about 40 years ago that he wrote it. And the song is really loved by the residents here in Ypsi. And we was having a conversation not too long ago, and he was telling me that the song is an official song, official city song. And I'm like, well, why is it the official city song? Because everybody recognizes it as the official city song. So I'm here to motion and propose that the song is amended from an official city song to the official city song for Ypsi. That's it.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and also, if maybe he could be awarded monetarily for his 40-year contribution to the city, promotion of the city as well. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Yvonne Cudney. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm going to talk really fast because I have a lot to cover. My name is Yvonne Cudney, and I'm the Community Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Housing Bureau for Seniors. Some of you may remember that in November I presented to City Council about hardship exemptions. As a quick recap, exemptions are a tool that low-income people, homeowners, can use to ask their local governments for a reduction or a complete waiver of their property taxes. State law allows every local unit of government to set their own income thresholds for determining who may be eligible for poverty exemptions, so long as the income threshold is not below the federal poverty levels. State law also permits local units of government to grant exemptions in whole, so 100%, or in part at the rates of 50 or 25% reductions in taxable value for the tax year. Many jurisdictions also institute asset tests, exempting the homestead and often vehicles from that test. Historically, the city of Ypsi has used the federal poverty limits as their income threshold to determine financial eligibility for poverty exemptions. In 2022, that was $12,880 for a single person. The city of Ypsilanti's asset test followed suit using the federal poverty thresholds to determine eligibility, with an additional stipulation that a household may not have more than the year's projected property taxes plus 50% in liquid assets. To illustrate what that means, the median property tax in Ypsi is about $3,500. If you make it 150%, it's $5,350. So a household may not have more than $5,350 in liquid assets, which most of these people don't have. Finally, the city of Ypsi granted historically 25, 50, and 100% reductions. In 2021, the city of Ypsi granted 11 hardship applications out of 11 hardship applications. I've had the opportunity to review the resolution 2023-013 before City Council. The resolution increases Ypsi's income limits to 30% of the area median income, which is good. Its asset test from previous years carries over to this year, but it no longer provides for a complete 100% waiver of property taxes, and it limits all reductions to 50%. The outcome of that is this: more owner-occupied households will be eligible for hardship exemptions based solely on income. To be eligible for the poverty reduction, the household must still have assets less than $12,880 and less than $5,300 in liquid assets. And finally, if the household meets all these requirements, the household will be granted a 50% reduction. In reality, what this means for those 11 eligible households last year who had incomes of $1,000 and less than $1,073 is now they will have to pay $150 a month for property taxes. One sentence. This will penalize the homeowners with the lowest of the low incomes. My question to City Council is this what council intended to do?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Sigrid Melvin, she's, I don't see her. Oh, okay. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address council that was not signed up on the sheet? Is there anyone online?
If anyone attending the meeting virtually would like to make comment, please raise your hand now and you'll have 3 minutes to address council. No hands are raised, council.
Well, seeing none, we will close public comment and move into our first presentation, or only presentation, from Dan Merritt and Daniel Clark. Good evening.
So my name is Daniel Clark. With me is Dan Merritt. So we'll be tag teaming this presentation tonight. I did leave this presentation at each of your spots, so if you would like to follow along with this, as well as up on the screen. So we are the external auditor for the city of Ypsilanti. You have a year end of June 30th. So we are presenting on your June 30th, 2022 financial statements. If you slip to slide 2, these are just the areas that we're going to cover tonight. As you'll see, there's a section for questions, but feel free to ask as we go along. Slide 3. I am the signing principal on your engagement, so I've worked with the city for several years now. Again, this year, these are the other team members. As you'll see, Dan is here, was the senior manager in charge of field work, but we also had Paula Bedford, Taylor Schaefer, and then we had 2 staff, Aaron Wade and Brendan Burns, who were involved in completing the audit this year. Slide 4. So you should have received a copy of the actual financial statements when they were issued prior to December 31st. So Treasury, they require the cities and the municipalities to issue their financials within 6 months after year end. So you did meet that deadline. So you should have received the financial statements as well as a board communication letter. And this slide summarizes what was on the board communication letter. And I will go through these just really quickly. So first and foremost, we did issue an unmodified opinion on those June 30th, 2022 financial statements. So that would be a clean opinion, exactly what the city would be looking for and what they've received in the last several years. Number 2, we're asked to communicate any new accounting pronouncements. New this year was an accounting pronouncement related to leases. So we did assess the leases of the city and deemed none of them to be applicable as far as that new standard goes. So there was no change in how those were reported last year to this year. Number 3, we are asked to assess accounting estimates. Those things would be depreciation expense on your capital assets, any allowances against uncollectible accounts, those inputs that calculate your compensated absences, so your accrued sick and vacation, as well as inputs related to your pension and your other post-employment benefit liability. We assess those and deem those all to be reasonable. Number 4, happy to state we encountered no difficulties during the audit. In fact, we had great cooperation. All questions we asked were answered. All information that we asked for was provided. Reagan and his team do a fantastic job, which is illustrated in number 5 and 6. We had no material misstatements as part of the audit process, so the records that were given to us were clean and in good order. And we also will opine on any findings, and there were no material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or even other matters. So it speaks to the quality of the information that was provided to us. So from that, we'll move on to the financials section. So obviously important to any organization is talking about how they are financially. We'll start with here the balance sheet, so which includes all your assets and deferred outflows. You'll see there on the slide number 5, the city had just over 60 million in assets. So that includes things like cash investments, receivables, other assets, net pension asset, and we'll talk about that briefly. And then you have obviously a large chunk related to your net capital assets, which relates to your infrastructure, your buildings, your vehicles, etc. And then there are some deferred outflows related to the amortization of certain costs over a fixed period for your pension and your OPEB. And that OPEB stands for other post-employment benefits, so your retiree healthcare, etc. So compared to last year, your assets went up about $7.5 million. A big change that you'll see over to the right, so you'll see your cash and investments went up about 4.2 million, so 4.162. The reason for that are twofold. Obviously, the city had positive results in the general fund specifically. You had about 600,000 in general fund net income. All funds, you had about 1.37 in net income. And then you also received some ARPA money. So you received 2.2 approximately in ARPA money, which had not yet been spent on its intended purpose at the end of the year. So those two combined, that money's still sitting there yet to be spent, and we'll talk about that on the next page. The only other significant change, you'll see your net pension asset. So typically, an organization will have net pension asset or liability, depending on whether the assets that go against that liability exceed or are less than the liability. And in this case, your MERS or your employee retirement system actually have more assets than the liability. So you're currently sitting on a net pension asset, and you were about 131% funded at the end of fiscal year 22. That's up from 129% funded last year. And then your net capital assets there actually went down about 912,000. So that changes either up by adding additions or down by depreciating those additions. So your depreciation actually exceeded your additions this year. You had 870,000 in capital additions, and you had 1.8 million in depreciation. So that's why that number went down. Go to slide 6. So you had total liabilities of $60.8 million in liabilities compared to 62.6 last year. So your liabilities actually went down about 1.8 million. You'll see a big chunk of that. That first line item that we'll talk about is the unearned revenue. So you had 2.2, 2.3 in unearned revenue. So that is your ARPA money. So it's unearned because you haven't yet spent it on its intended purpose. So once you do decide, if not already, obviously this is as of June 30th, that will move into the revenue category. So until that point, it sits as unearned. You did not have that as of last year. So that was why that was 0 last year. Your long-term debt was sitting at 20.8 million. That did go down from 23.8 million last year. Most of that is just due to annual debt payments. So you had about $3 million in annual debt payments, no significant additions, and no real new debt in 2022. Your net pension liability stood at 25.7 million. So this is your police and fire pension, whereas your other pension asset, as I talked about on the previous slide, was your employee retirement system for general employees. So you're currently sitting at 49% funded in your net pension liability for police and fire. That actually was about 62% last year. So that gets measured up and down, typically depending on the investment returns of the plan. Obviously, this year the investment returns were significantly less. Actually, I had a loss this year just due to the market, and last year it improved because the market was much better last year than this year. No other real change there that I wanted to talk about. So if you want to go to the next slide. So we talked about your assets and your liabilities. What's left, the difference between that is your net position or your equity. And in governmental terms, that's split into 3 different buckets. One of which is related to your net investment in capital assets. That equated to about 25% or 14.9 million. 14.6 million or another 25% related to your restricted money. And then you actually had a negative 29.7 million in unrestricted, which represent about negative 50%. And I'll talk about why that's negative on the next couple slides. So slide 8 speaks to those different buckets. So that top one is your net investment in capital assets, was at 14.9 million at the end of 2022. This is a chart of the last 5 years. That's remained relatively stable, up and down, depending on significant additions or depreciation, so no significant change there. Your restricted went up to about 14.5 million. I'd say most of that relates to, I believe, that ARPA money, and then also what's restricted is the net pension asset. So those, or I'm sorry, the net pension liability will be related to that. Slide 9 talks about your net position for unrestricted. So that top line represents, if we were to take out the effects of your pension and OPEB, you'd actually be sitting at a positive number. But because the standards required in 2017 for OPEB and 2015 for pension, those liabilities had to go on your books, which is typical for all municipalities across the country. You're currently sitting at a negative 29.6 million in negative unrestricted. But like to show that top line, what that effect would be without that. So again, not unusual for organizations such as yourself. And then slide 10, I'll wrap up my portion and then have Dan come up here. This is your net or your profit and loss entity-wide, so all funds. The city had 24.7 million in revenue. That's up from last year. You had 23.596, so increase about 1.1 million. And then your expenses were 15.3 million with a net income of just over $9 million. Most of that has to do with, so anytime your pension or OPEB change one way or the other, it's if it's a positive change, it goes against expense as well as a negative change. So this year, your actual OPEB went down significantly. So that actually is a negative expense that goes against all expenses of the entity. So that's why you're seeing a significant reduction in expenses. It's not that your general expenses went down, but it's that OPEB change of about 4.9 million that hit your expenses at the entity-wide level. So with that, I will turn the next part over to Dan Merritt.
Good evening. So Daniel's been talking about sort of your entity-wide statements, right? These are your statements that include all of your long-term assets as well as your long-term liabilities. In the next couple of slides, we're going to be focusing just on the general fund being the chief operating fund of any governmental entity. The general fund is usually representative of the main activities of the city and is always a good place to start when thinking about the financial operations of a governmental organization. So you can see on this slide, we've got your two main revenue line items for your general fund, which are your property taxes and your intergovernmental revenue. Now, that top line is your property tax line. You can see over the last 5 years, that property tax amount has generally grown from 2018 through 2021. It's a good thing. That means your property tax base is increasing. That means the amount of money that you're bringing in is increasing. Now, you see that drop off a little bit in 2022, and sometimes that's a cause for concern because it might mean that your property tax base is shrinking, but that's not the case for the city. The city's property tax base actually continues to increase. The city has chosen to levy a slightly lower tax rate than it has in previous years. So you see that drop off in revenue isn't necessarily the result of your contracting tax base, but simply the amount that the city has chosen to levy. The line below it is your intergovernmental revenue. You can sort of see that there's a high water mark there in 2021 of intergovernmental revenue. That's often where a lot of that pandemic relief revenue came through, and you can sort of see that drop off to sort of pre-pandemic levels in 2022. So nothing of particular concern there, just some one-time state and local funding. Onto our next slide here, our sort of revenue and expense comparison for the general fund. You can see that since 2018, the city has had revenue in excess of expenditures every single year since 2018. That's always a good thing. You see that little, very small bar on the right there, the green one, that's what you're adding to fund balance. Think of that as, you're sort of adding to savings every single year. So while that number has fluctuated a little bit, $500,000 in 18, then up to that high water mark in 21 of $1 million, and then sort of back down to about $500,000, that reflects that each year you're adding to that fund balance. One of the things I think is sort of important to point out is even though you sort of reduced the incoming property tax revenue a little bit, you've also sort of held off increasing expenditures, so you've managed to maintain that addition to savings in addition to fund balance. On the next slide here, we have our general fund coverage ratio. Now, what this is sort of an evaluation of how well the general fund balance is doing, right? So what you do is you're sort of taking your expenditure number for the year and dividing it by the number of months in the year and saying, how many months could we cover just with what's in fund balance? This is sort of similar to thinking about in personal finance, how many months of savings do I have, right? The GFOA, the National Governmental Finance Officers Association, recommends that you maintain at least a 2-month fund balance in your general fund at all times. You can see that since 2018, the city has always maintained at least 3 months of fund balance, and in 2022 is actually at its high water mark for the last 5 years of a 4.32 months of fund balance. So net overall, a very good thing for the city. And finally, our last slide here, just talking about some of the upcoming pronouncements. The GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, is the oversight organization which defines how governmental accounting should be done nationwide. Every year, they tend to issue us new standards and say, this is what we're concerned about, and here's how we're going to change accounting practice going forward. In the last year or two, they've issued several standards which relate to long-term contracts. So the one that was implemented this year, leases, related to contracts that evaluated property, land, equipment, things like that. And they're going to issue they've issued us two more statements, 94 and 96, that relate to public and public-private partnerships and subscription-based information technology agreements. Now, what are all of these? These are just standards that say we think there are things that governments are doing, long-term contracts, which should be reflected on your balance sheet. Say you enter into a contract to lease equipment for 10 years. They say in the past, we might have reported that, depending on the terms of the contract, by just reporting the inflow or outflow of resources every single year. The GASB has said, we think that you should reflect that total long-term liability and long-term asset on your balance sheet. So all of these three statements sort of reflect three different categories of agreements that they'd like us to evaluate, make sure that if it meets certain terms, that that's reflected on the organization's balance sheet. So for the next fiscal year 23, the city will be having to evaluate both any public-private partnerships that they have or subscription-based information technology agreements that they have. The city's accounting department, I'm sure, will be working with Raymond to determine what, if any, impact that will have on the balance sheet. There are a couple of other standards that I'm not going to cover in sort of close evaluation, as they don't have any material impact for the city. However, GASB 101 will be applicable in fiscal year 25. This relates to how the city has to account for compensated absences, which are the city has to make a determination of how much paid time off, sick leave, vacation employees have at the end of the year, and they can make an accrual for that says essentially this is how much liability we think the city would have if everyone quit today and we had to pay them all out on their PTO and their sick time. The GASB 101 is going to change how that's reported. Generally speaking, most businesses are going to see that compensated absence liability increase as a result of the standard because it scopes certain things in that the previous standard, GASB 16, scoped out. So that's going to affect you in fiscal year 25. Again, that's an entity-wide calculation, so it's not going to affect your general fund results. That's the end of our sort of prepared slides. So of course, we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much. Questions from council? Oh, thank you so very much. I know.
Thank you very much for having us.
All right, have a good evening. All right. With that, we'll move into our resolutions. So Councilmember D. Simmons, you have our first resolution tonight.
All righty. All right. All right, resolution number 2023-013, resolved by the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the adoption of guidelines of poverty exemptions is required of the City Council, and whereas the principal residence of persons who the assessor and Board of Review determines by reason of poverty to be unable to contribute to the public charge is eligible for exemption in part from taxation under Public Act 390 of 1994. And whereas pursuant to PA 390 of 1994, the City of Ypsilanti, Washtenaw County adopts the following guidelines for the Board of Review to implement. And so read the rest of this into the record.
Yep. Can you move it?
Yes, I will move this.
I'll support.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there a staff presentation from anyone on this, or? Oh. Good evening. Hi.
Good evening. I'm Doug Shaw, Managing Partner for WCA Assessing, and Courtney Borden, who is your certifying assessor. We're here for any questions you might have.
All right. Questions from council? Don't have any? Don't have any?
You have some? I'm good. Oh, I mean, discussion, but not necessarily a question. Go for it.
So any questions for the staff before we move to discussion then?
Well,
Councilmember D. Simmons?
Yes, I have a quick question. Just thinking about in terms of as we look at how many folks were granted the exemption in the past. One of my questions, so folks have to apply for this each year. A question I have is how often do we see someone applying over, like, is it the same 11 folks typically, you know?
Yeah, typically, for sure, everybody has to reapply for a poverty exemption every year. And the reason being is everybody's situation changes from year to year. So they need to come back. It's a state requirement. Typically, we see the same applicants year after year. And you might see some new applicants for a while and they drop off because their situation might have changed. Generally speaking, we'll see senior citizens on a continual basis. The amounts of poverty appeals we have is, if I'm saying this right, 7 to 10 a year?
Yeah.
7 to 10 a year.
And do we see them spread across the city kind of equally, or do they wind up kind of being concentrated in certain parts?
I'll let Courtney answer that question.
I think more so concentrated certain parts, more of the south end of the city.
Okay.
So the 7 to 10 is year over year, that's the average, or did it go up during the pandemic, or?
We haven't had that many, honestly, since I've been here in 2012. Probably 12 tops in 1 year is what we've seen for poverty applications. 2022, we had 7 apply and 6 were approved, 1 was denied because they didn't qualify.
So out of the whole time, how many denials average? Usually none?
Well, I would say very, very low denials occur. Even if they submit an application, maybe that is missing information because they can only apply that 1 time a year. We have March, July, and December for another opportunity. So we might give them the application back and say, you know, we need more info, or come back and see us in July. We want to give you that chance still to apply. So the denials here in Ypsilanti have been low. Most of the time, the people that apply are really needing the assistance and they're approved.
And our firm represents 39 communities in the state of Michigan. And I would say across the board, denials are generally low. The reason being is everybody knows the guidelines before they apply. So they kind of know if they're going to qualify or not.
Councilmember Simmons, I saw your hand up. D. Simmons? Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Another question I have is for folks that are applying, so do they come and get a lot of like assistance to help them with the application? Are they coming in with like a packet of information that they're kind of turning in, like they kind of have to figure it all out themselves? Or do they have help with the application?
I will let you know that Courtney does help them throughout the process. She makes sure that they know exactly what they have to do. She helps them find what they need. She actually will help anybody through the entire process.
Thank you. Councilmember Sweet?
Just clarification on the 7 to 10. You said 7 to 10. Is that applications or is that appeals to the Board of Review? When
I would be estimating a number of poverty applications that are
okay,
submitted to the office.
total applications. Okay, and then can you confirm what the guidelines previous were? I know the proposal that is written here has 50% reduction. Can you confirm what percentage? Was it 50?
It was 50 voted on last year too.
Okay, and has it been 50? Has that been consistent that it's been 50? Okay.
Prior to that, the Board of Review was allowed to make a reduction based on what they felt was the right adjustment. The state, starting in 2021, said the entire state's got to do this the same way.
Okay.
So they made up an application for everybody to use. They then made sure that everybody's found the same guidelines, except for you get to decide the income threshold and you get to decide the amount of reduction that if somebody does qualify, how much a reduction. They have given 25%, 50%, or 100%. They skip 75, and I don't know why. But if you want 75, you'd have to make a special petition and explain why you want it to be 75%. But right now, it's currently a 50% reduction.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem?
There's 7 to 10 applicants and most of them get the exemption. How many households do we have that actually qualify under the previous guidelines and this guideline? That was something I couldn't find in looking up.
I wouldn't even begin to be able to guess that answer. You know, the 2022 guidelines, I believe most of the applicants are single households, one person in the household, and that income threshold is about $12,800. I don't know how many single applicants we have out there that possibly could apply. I just don't know.
Right. And it doesn't break down, the data that I looked at didn't break down renters versus zoners in terms of household income. They would report that, but they didn't tell you how many people are in there or.
Yeah, and one of the requirements to qualify for a PRE is you have to be the principal residence,
Right.
the owner of the property, and occupy it.
I'm just trying to gauge, you know, how many people are actually qualifying for this because we have a high renter population and all the data I looked at, I couldn't figure out what that meant in terms of homeowners in those income brackets. I can't see because my glasses are fogged up.
Councilmember D. Simmons?
So I guess the question I have is just thinking about, so with the threshold, the median income threshold, so increasing, what, like, how that impacted or why it didn't impact, I guess, the assets that them folks could have too, with the increase in the amount of their income?
Yeah, your asset test would not change, or under this current language in this resolution, it would be 50% more than their taxes, so 150% or 50% more. If their taxes were $1,000, the assets can't be more than $1,500 in total. In most cases, the taxes are greater than $1,000, but you know, most people, when they get to this point where they're applying, the asset's not the problem. They've exhausted their assets. That's why they're here.
Mm-hmm. And then for folks who wind up, so since it's been 50%, I just wonder about whether we're actually seeing that other 50% coming in, or if there's still continual hardship for folks. And I don't know, I don't know who would know that, but.
That's something that we could look into the Treasury to see if that other 50% of tax is delinquent or paid.
Mhm.
Through Reagan's office, but we could get that info to you.
Yeah, because I'm just wondering, because I think that, like, thinking about the percentage, if people are still like struggling to pay, then it seems like, you know, probably a lot of effort to try to get them to do so. If they've already kind of given us very much information to show like that. So anyway, so I'm just wondering about that in terms of trying to determine what the percentage should be.
Yeah, a lot of communities, to kind of answer that question, a lot of communities have selected the 50% reduction. And the reason being is they can, whatever's left over that you do have to pay, they will get it in their Michigan property tax credit. But the only hangup is they need to apply. They'd have to apply their income tax to the state for that credit. So they would get whatever remaining tax dollars are paid by them back, and it's returned back to them from the state of Michigan. And the reason why most communities have selected 50% and not 100 is because then the state's helping too, instead of just all the local jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
So the 150%, looking at the difference between the total assets and the liquid assets. And when I looked at the other communities surrounding us, only Pittsfield Township had a limitation on the liquid assets. Everybody else just set a number of 20, 25, $50,000 for total assets. I'm trying to figure out what the rationale was for having a limitation on the liquid assets.
I don't know. We didn't come up with this resolution to be brought before us. I don't know the rationale. I can't.
But I guess it carried over from the previous year, so I was like trying to figure out where that came from.
Continued over for several years, actually. So what we were requested was to rewrite the income thresholds for tonight.
Right. And so if the one thing that IPSI does that other communities didn't do, they had specific amounts, the 20, 25, 50,000, whereas Ypsilanti graded it based on the number of people in the household, which I thought was a better way to do it. The question was, lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. Come back to me. I'll
Further questions, discussion?
Are we in discussion right now or just questions? Sorry, clarification.
We can do whichever. Questions for them, discussion with us?
No.
If we're done with.
With questions, yes.
No more questions for them. I'm just gonna make sure we're.
We'll stay here.
I know, we might ask them more.
Yeah, let me look at the,
Help issue is that with the household, that goes by income, but the 25, 50, 100%, they adopted the 50% because of them filing the 1040 CR, which is a requirement of the property application, to get that extra money back from the state to help pay their city tax, which Mr. Shaw was talking about.
when I looked at other communities, I was getting back to the 50%. I saw that we were the only community that had 50%. So you're saying that was the default set up by the state, and other people change that? Because I'm looking at Pittsfield and Superior and Ypsi Township, and they're running 50, 25, 150, 25, and then who's it? I guess Pittsfield actually had 175, 50, and 25. So they must have applied for something.
They have to pick one. I'm not sure what they might have had out there, but I know as of 2021, everybody had to pick one, either the 25, 50, or 100, or petition for something different. But you had to do a special petition to the State Tax Commission and see
Get something besides that, right?
they only could select one. They couldn't move it around. 3 years ago, Ypsi and a lot of other places before the state instituted this change, they moved it around. They used whatever they wanted to do. And left it up to the Board of Review to decide that too.
So our choice here then is between 50% or 150 and 25 with the progressive.
Yeah, you can decide two things. The income threshold, as long as it's not below the federal poverty standards. And then you get to decide the 25, 50, or 100% reduction. I don't think we have enough time to try to convince the State Tax Commission to go with the 75% reduction. We're just getting too close to their meeting deadline. But yeah, you can make that change as well. You don't have to use the 50%.
Okay. So just to clarify, 50% or a range that skips 75.
It can only be 25, 50, or 100. It can't be anywhere in between. It can
Right,
only
but
be
what I'm getting at is you can have a single number or you can have three numbers.
No, you can only have one.
So the city of Ann Arbor has 25, 50, and 100 with a graded income that qualify for those things.
They should only be using one according to the State Tax Commission guidelines. Now, are you sure the information you're getting is current information?
It's from the county website.
Okay.
So it was last year's setup.
Yeah.
Because we were the only one that had a single value, and that's why I thought that was kind of strange, is because all the other communities had various percentages of relief that they were giving.
It's quite possible. I haven't heard of somebody petitioning for multiple levels of reduction. I guess if you can petition for a 75% reduction or something else, I haven't heard of multiple levels. I guess you can. I don't know.
Okay, because Ann Arbor has a graded scale with incomes between in different ranges. You can give them 25%. In this range, you can give them 50%, and in this range, you can give them 100%.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm asking this question, because I was going to propose that we go to that kind of graded scale with a similar range calculation.
I can see that existing prior to 2021. Everybody had their own systems in place, but since 2021, you had to select one of the three or make a special petition for something different.
Wow, that changes everything. I guess the other question I have is when we look at the qualifying assets. Never mind. I just answered my own question. So the qualifying assets, total assets for somebody in Ypsilanti is based on the federal qualifying numbers and not the values that we've increased. That's correct, right?
Yep. It should be on there. I remember reading that, yes.
All right. Other questions for them? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Please just hang around for a little.
We will.
Because
We'll make sure.
probably need you. Okay, so discussion amongst council. Councilmember Sweet.
I want to start with the liquid asset part that I think Councilmember Simmons brought up, or I don't know, someone addressed. Steve, sorry. That we are one of only the few of our neighbors in the eastern part of the county here that has the structure that it does, where it's your property taxes plus 50%. Most have either no cap, not applicable on a liquid asset test, or, for example, Pittsfield Township has $1,000. So I would like to see us move towards eliminating that, and I don't think it's relevant in determining the numbers, and I think it adds more complication and confusion to people when they're applying. The other thing with that too is under exclusions. So everyone excludes the homestead, obviously, but also having a automobile, or as Ann Arbor City calls it, a standard mode of transportation exclusion in there as well. That's also very common, so that is not something that's being held against applicants as well, to make sure that their vehicle and the homestead are excluded in this determination.
We don't currently have that. I'm looking at the chart.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. You're correct.
So so just to clarify, you're suggesting that we we remove the use of automobiles as an asset.
Correct.
And further, that we don't take into consideration other assets that they might have.
As far as liquid assets go, so you can set a total asset level. Maybe Steve, do you feel like you want to explain this better than I can? About that total asset level part, because other communities have higher thresholds and we are following the federal level on that part. So I'll let you speak to that if you want.
So with the federal qualifying levels as our limit for total assets, lots of communities have they set a total asset limit that's much higher than that, twice that, right? And then they say we don't care what those assets are, whether they're liquid or it's like your total assets are what they are, and so they don't differentiate between those, except for Pittsfield Township put it at 1,000, and us who put it at 150% of the taxes. If we get rid of that, then it doesn't matter how the assets fit into the overall scheme. They have one number that they have to go with. And so their total assets would be, if we get rid of that, then it's just like, okay, your total assets are at the federal qualifying level, which if we leave that the way it is, then that's still much lower asset qualifications than other than other municipalities. And so they give them a higher threshold. And so they can go up to $25,000 in total assets, whereas we're setting it based on the number of people in the household, but we're setting it at such a low level for, it's half of what our surrounding neighbors are setting it at for a single household, right? So, for a single person living in their assets can only be $13,590, whereas if they lived in Ipsy Township or any of the other townships, it'd be 20 or 25,000. That would be allowable. And so if we just get rid of the limit on the liquid assets and raise the other asset, then the total assets, then that would account for that in a more meaningful way, as far as I'm concerned.
So in terms of thinking that more people would be eligible for the exemption,
Right.
because I'm looking at, so when thinking about liquid assets, so this is money that they would have in a bank account. I'm just trying to see what other things are under this liquid asset here, like the second home, all of that kind of stuff.
That's a confusing thing for me. It's the second home, because it says if you have a second home, you can't apply for this. And then it says your second home won't be counted. And it's like, oh, it's kind of redundant in a way, but
So then this is also, so this would be like looking at, so like investments or, people who are able to have like a 401k or things like that, which obviously is not something that everyone has access to, but that would just allow more folks who have more of those other assets to qualify. So trying to
Correct.
eliminate this is trying to open it for people who may not be in extreme poverty or, but may have maybe what we would call, like, would have like, maybe a fixed income, right? But they may have other assets to, keep them out of actually like poverty. Is that, I'm just trying to, think about what the difference would be in terms
Right.
of what this could look like. So,
if somebody qualified with the total amount of assets, but we're over on the liquid assets, they'd be disqualified. So it's like, well, why is that counting against them versus somebody else who has assets in a different category? When their total assets would be, you could have somebody with lower total assets and a high liquid asset that would be excluded when somebody with the same amount of total assets would be included because they had low liquid assets. And so while their net worth is the same, one person gets excluded because they had it in cash and the other person had it in, another car, something like that.
all right, yeah.
And I like the way that Ann Arbor stated the standard mode of transportation, and it's only one. So if there's more than one vehicle, you can only claim one vehicle as the exclusion for that. And so if somebody had an e-bike and they use that to get to work, then that wouldn't be included as one of the assets that were counted towards that.
Further discussion? Okay, so, were you came up as soon as I was.
No, I was going to say, if there's no other discussion, then
was gonna make some-
there were
some motions
changes
here.
that were
Yeah.
going to be proposed.
That's what I was gonna say too. Sorry. You had some things you wanted to change, so you can make motions if you'd like for amendments. Or whoever wants to.
Yeah, where do we start? So I'd like to amend the current resolution then to remove the cap or any amount related to liquid assets. And then also add, in addition to exclusions, the standard mode of transportation as an additional exclusion.
Is there support?
So for.
I think that's it.
I have other changes
I'm like
I
trying to
wanted in there, but
go through
yeah.
my head. I'm like, I think that.
Yeah.
Um,
And I was gonna ask Mr. Barr, is it okay if we do those together? Should we separate them? It's okay, okay. All right, awesome. All right, discussion on the amendment. Ooh.
What is the?
Oh, wait. Can I add something to it?
Oh, wait, what?
Well, I was gonna add stuff
let's
to it
finish.
in a different amendment.
Let's do a different one. Yeah, let's do this one first and then do a different one.
So Councilmember D. Simmons,
don't
you
lump
had a
everything
question
together.
about this amendment? Desiree?
Yeah, I was gonna try to pull up, but you, so what is the, what is the, standard, whatever?
What does that mean?
No, yeah, what is this, so what is the,
So the total assets.
It's under the exclusion.
To the federal.
Yes, there
Yes.
was. Oh, yeah, there was.
wait, so this is, you're just saying this
Who's
is
wrong?
what the,
These are the federal.
so this would be what would be setting, what the asset would be overall,
Right.
as opposed to,
As opposed to setting a static amount. Or this is what it is in proposed at the moment. It carried over from last year. This is last year, this is this year.
I have a question too, actually.
And so what he's saying is getting rid of this so that that covers everything. And then adding.
so
an
as opposed to
exclusion
this
here.
5,000, it would move to
That is the total.
15.
Right. So it's now total is this, but you can have up to $5,000 in liquid assets out of that.
Steve, can you say the totals out loud?
Sure.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, let's just stick with the one since that's the primary, because that's just, I'm just trying to get a sense of what that move will be, and then, yeah.
With the total assets.
Yeah, so
got
with
it.
moving from what we have now, which is whatever that asset, the 150%, which is 5,000.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We're talking about,
I know we're talking about down here,
It's in the whole pack.
we're talking about right here.
right here, the 5,000.
This
I'm just
number.
looking at the,
Just getting rid of that.
Let's see how this.
Okay.
Is it?
I don't know that it says it in here, so I was
In the initial packet, you know.
looking, yeah.
Okay.
And this, I feel like this should be just discussed with everybody.
Oh, yeah,
so that we
sorry.
all
Yeah.
understand it.
So the
Okay.
question was, so the amendment is to get rid of the liquid asset limitation and just have that be a single total asset limitation, and to add the exclusion of the standard mode of transportation.
Thank you for clarifying that. I understood, but I wanted to make sure everybody else
We're
understood.
on the same page, yeah.
I do have a question about the standard mode of transportation. So I don't, Evan, was it you or Steve who was explaining that in either Ann Arbor or something, it's like you
Steve
can
was
only
kinda
utilize like
discussing.
one mode of transportation to get the exemption?
Right, I think the state law says that if you have 3 cars, you can only claim 1.
Oh, so that's already in the state law. We wouldn't have to add language to this because
That's
it's
my
already there.
understanding.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. Okay,
So that would be the, how you define it.
Right.
okay.
And so somebody who doesn't have a car, but they paid $5,000 for an e-bike to get to work, could then claim that
As a mode.
their exclusion.
Got it. Okay. Any additional discussion or questions on the amendment? Seeing none. Clerk Kalanga, please call the roll.
Councilmember Sweet,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember D. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember J. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, so that amendment has carried. And then Mayor Pro Tem, you said you had an additional potential amendment?
Yeah, I was gonna submit an amendment to go with the range of 25, 50, and 100 at graded, as it's stated in the Ann Arbor ordinance. But if that's not possible, then I won't do that. But what I would like to do is raise the total asset value from the federal qualifying amount to, unfortunately, I didn't have data to kind of figure this out and where it was going to land, but I'd like to increase that. That's way too big. To $25,000.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded, so discussion. All right, Steve, can you give us some numbers?
Sure. So, I'm looking at this and I thought that, taking it from the federal qualifying levels to the levels that we've stated here, which is 30% of the AMI. So the range from 24,750 to 46,700, but that upper range gets to be quite a bit of cash so trying to compress that to some extent and just going with the 25, which is close to the lowest qualifying, or the lowest limit that we have. So if they have cash, if their income is 24,750, then they'd also be allowed to have $25,000 in assets besides that. The person is still making, it's still less than $50,000 combined. And I'm not married to that number. It was just like I was trying to figure out a calculation to have, somewhere between those two things, so that at the high end you're not giving somebody $50,000 credit, but you're not shortcutting people in the middle. And I haven't figured out a decent way to grade that do that.
Because if you're saying if we're proposing that it stays at a 50% reduction, you're saying that the asset, it's hard to determine that asset, what that number should be? Is that?
Right.
Yeah, okay. Because if there's not going to be a gradient in the reduction, then it's hard to put yeah, okay, I see what you're saying.
And if we're going to give them, if we're not going to have a gradient in terms of the percent of relief, then maybe increasing it from the federal qualifying to 150% of that federal qualifying. And I just picked 25,000 as a different number, but it's not clear to me which is going to be most beneficial to people across the spectrum on this.
I'm not looking at, I'm trying to, I'm trying to like get a sense of, what this, in terms of how many more people, and recognizing that this would be thinking about how it would impact folks in other parts of the city, primarily. Because obviously, if the way it's been situated and who's been granted the exemption, that a lot of what y'all are talking about now is to expand who would be eligible, and being eligible in very different ways. So I'm imagining, someone who's been kind of going through this process as it is, and they're sitting with like, probably like $2,000 in assets. And we're talking about being like, oh, well, someone can have $25,000 in assets, but we're still getting the same exemption at this 50%. As a person who's like not really into means testing overall ideologically, and also recognizing like if I were that person, I'd feel some type of way. But I don't think we should do policy just because of how we feel. But I'm still trying to like figure out that range because it feels like it's very different. And recognizing the population of folks that might have these assets, that would come through retirement benefits and all these other things that might have exempted them from being eligible before, what that means in terms of overall like access, right? Because I think about that 50% for someone who has very little asset means something very different than a person who does have those assets and are able to do all the things you can do in retirement, right. So like, I'm just trying to like figure out like what that range is and also how it would impact the city's budget in terms of that increase of folks that would be giving less taxes and what that would mean, like how, and I don't have a good answer in terms of what that means in terms of quality of life, like how many more people who are kind of in this in-between space, to understand, what that means, or if that winds up creating a further gap in some ways in terms of, when we think about like access to opportunity in different ways. So I'm just trying to like think through this a little bit out loud, to see what that means. I feel like, if we were doing these steps, I feel like I'd feel a lot more comfortable with it, to be honest, because then we'd be able to maintain that people who are currently being granted would be able to get 100% because they're obviously very low income. And they wouldn't be able to really maintain housing in the city without that. Like, it means a lot. Versus some people who it's like, it would be nice to have a reduction in taxes. And please, let me get to a certain age and be able to have a reduction in my taxes. So, anyway, so I recognize I recognize that, but I feel like I'd definitely be more comfortable if there were ways to put steps in it, if we're going through this process.
So I was gonna say, there is a, we could do that. It would just require the petition, correct?
Yeah, we have to go.
To go to the state to petition? Because it says too close for this year, but.
To deviate from being able, let's say somebody qualifies based on the guidelines that you've set, you have to make a decision of whether they get a 25% reduction in their taxable value, not assessment, taxable value, 50% or 100. We can't deviate from that this year. There's just not enough time. You got to pick one of those three. We can work on it for next year with you guys. And actually, at the end of December, Courtney can give you stats on whatever you do decide tonight and say, okay, we had this many applicants, this many were denied, and this many qualified. Obviously, we'll never know how many could have qualified that never came before you, but we can at least tell you how it worked. How'd your new guidelines work? Did it fit? Maybe you could work on adjustments for next year and also look at adjusting the applicants if they qualified. If you wanted to make a special petition to the State Tax Commission or request your own type of overall reduction.
So I'm just really confused because when I looked on the county's website and looked at those other communities, those are reported for 2023. So Ypsilanti Township, Pittsfield Township, and
Ann Arbor City.
Ann Arbor City. Well, Ann Arbor City was 22. So for 23, Ypsi Township had a 50 and 25, and Pittsfield Township had 175, 50, and 25. And I understood that the basics was you could do 100, 50, and 25, but if you wanted the 75, that's where you had the petition. It wasn't that you could only use one number. It's just that 75 was excluded from the state statute, so that the other three could be implemented, and we could have the system that Councilmember Simmons is talking about, and provide that kind of balance for people that are very low income.
You have to pick just one, but it doesn't mean in the future for next year you can't go with a model and petition to the State Tax Commission and say, hey, we want to come up with our own. We want to make, if somebody qualifies, we want to make it 70, 60, and 40. And you'd have to explain some little bit of rationale why you chose that, and they're going to review it as a commission. But you can try that. I just never heard of a community selecting three separate reduction amounts based on the applicant.
I thought it was interesting because the city of Ann Arbor was the only one that gave criteria for distinguishing what those levels were. It just left it up to the Board of Review to decide whether they got 25, 50, or 100% relief. And there was no stated criteria for those other communities. So I was like, that's a lot of latitude for the Board of Review, right?
It is, and it doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right according to the State Tax Commission's guidelines that they've stated that you as a council or a township board has to decide that amount. No longer can Board of Reviews decide that amount. So I can't answer why you're seeing that somewhere else.
All right.
I know that's not the way it's supposed to be done with everything that I do know.
So, Councilmember Simmons, rather than the $25,000, that's a big increase. would you propose we keep it at the federal level so that, that's graded. So people with, instead of being 25,000, each person would get this amount of assets depending on their household size.
And you're just trying to move to 25 overall?
Well,
regardless
because
regardless of the household size.
because the 25, 50, and 100 were taken off the table, I thought that was a reasonable thing to do, and then we could come back to that.
Well, I guess one of the things is because they said majority of folks who are applying are at the 1.
Mhm.
So, so I think that, it's not like as many people are applying at 8, right?
Right.
So it's really thinking it would change it for people who are 3 and below. Right? That the 25 would really be an increase in asset.
Right, and for the single people, that would be, doubling the assets they can have.
So just to understand, so right, like the overall purpose is to have more people be eligible.
Right. But the original intent was to have it balanced out for people with very low income. And so the two lowest incomes are the folks that I'm worried about, the people that make less than $20,000.
Right.
And so maybe not 25, but maybe 20,000, and then
And that would include their house.
is it possible to mix these and say 21 or 20 is the limit for 1 and 2 person households, and then the federal qualifying level is used for the rest? That gives you like a $20,000 minimum amount of assets. It raises those two categories, but it doesn't affect the other categories, and those are still based on the federal. All right.
Is this something that we need to tease out more before we actually go to voting on tonight? Or is there anything that is prohibiting us from figuring this out?
From what I do understand, the packets for border review for March had to be ready fairly quickly, so council needs to act.
I did have one clarifying question about that too, because when I read the resolution, it said they had until a week before the last meeting of the year, so they could apply for this all the way up to December, correct? Because I got different answers from different people, and some people said you have to be in March, and the only thing that's happening in July and December are appeals, but the way the resolution's written, you can do it up until the last meeting of the board.
Yes, and that's correct. Throughout the state of Michigan, you're allowed one opportunity to appeal for a poverty. You can choose to do it in March, or you can do it in July, or you can do it in December. You can't get denied in December and in March and come in July. You just get one chance. But you can hold off till December and file your petition for poverty to the Board of Review and get a reduction.
And so so if somebody applies in March, and we change these rules, somebody applies and it'll have to be retroactive, right?
You can't change it. After you make a decision prior to the March Board Review, those rules or your guidelines
Are good for the year.
intact for the
Got
year.
it. That's March 1st.
At the beginning of the March Board Review for the 2023 assessment roll and 2023 taxes.
I mean, I'd be willing, yeah. So I'd be willing to try that 20,000. I mean, we have to do this each year, so I feel like for me, I would want to know like how it changes, how it's used, and then and kind of be able to move from there.
Councilmember Sweet?
Are you saying, Des, that you're saying I'll change the number that Steve proposed, the 25 to 20? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I was going off, the kind of amended number to 20,
Mm-hmm.
and then to me, it's like you kind of try it on and then we'll have some data. Like, I feel like I don't know, like, I'd want to see how like all these changes impact who's applying, how many, if we're continuing to have the number of people who are applying be the number of people who are getting it, and seeing how that impacts the flow, and then how that impacts the city's revenue, and, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know. Like,
And
I don't know.
I feel like that's the reason why I'm like leery of it, because we just don't have any data. And so like I'm wondering how it would impact our revenue, our bottom line, and not wanting to like overshoot and then have an adverse effect, but also wanting to, help as many people as possible too. So I just feel weird. We've had these situations before where we don't actually know what the numbers look like and feeling uncomfortable with moving forward with that. But if we have to do something now, I mean, I guess we can try it and see what happens.
I just want to be clear. What is it? It's going from what to 20,000? What is the amount that is at now?
Now it's based on the federal qualifying numbers, so it depends on the size of the household.
Okay.
So it goes from 12,880 for a single person household up to 44,660 for an 8-person household. And what I also don't want to do is shortcut the people who have a bunch of kids. Kids come with assets, but those are normal home goods, which is an interesting. Usual home goods don't exist. So
If I may interject, one of the reasons for the step-up process for the number of occupants in the household is the poverty does look at the income of all occupants in the household. So I would recommend showing some type of step-up process that's done in past guidelines and state-approved guidelines. Instead, I think what I'm hearing is maybe making it 20-something thousand for everybody. I would not recommend that.
yeah, I think he was suggesting doing 20,000 for 1 person and 2 person, which is the ones that would be an increase for. And then following the steps as the guidelines state for the rest.
Okay.
So it would be basically just increasing the number of folks who are in that first 2 steps.
So you would use the federal guidelines except change the number of the first step.
First and the second.
2, the first and the second.
the first and second steps would be $20,000, and then for households from 3 to 8, it would be the federal qualifying.
Okay.
Which ends up being more for those people, so it works in their favor, right? That's the whole point, I'm assuming.
More for whom?
The homeowner, property owner.
For the first 2, yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying the
Right,
third.
right.
That's why you're not capping it at 20, because because the numbers obviously go up to 44.
Right.
So okay, that's what
So
I'm
okay.
clarifying.
So there was a number of 25. Is everyone agreed to 20 now?
I would take the 25 off, since I made that motion. You
And then
seconded.
Evan, you gotta.
Second, yes.
Okay.
Sorry. For the 20.
And then repropose this to be that the asset, the total assets be limited to $20,000 for 1 and 2 person households. And then for 3 through 8, the limitations would be the federal qualifying numbers.
So then I think a question
Wait,
would,
you have a support. Sorry.
okay.
Support.
Okay.
So I guess then the question would be, is there a cap for applications?
No.
No? Okay.
Now, just keep in mind, what you're talking about doing is having a static number for the first 2 members. The federal poverty standards and standards change from year to year based on inflation. So you might want to revisit this either every year, every other year.
Yeah, I
You
thought
might, might want to step it up.
I thought we were required to do that.
Yeah, I thought we had to don't we have to do this every year?
Unless your resolution states that you're going to use the federal poverty standards or some other standards, the home lunch program standards. That way, every year, that entity supplies you that
The
number.
numbers that change.
Uh,
Gotcha.
Okay.
And since
Just
we're
something to
putting our
think-
own number in, we'd have to go back to it ourselves and fix those,
Right.
those 2.
Unless, if you don't, it's going to stay a lower.
They're the
number.
same.
Which I think is good that we
Which is
revisit
fine,
it,
because then we
right?
look at it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Just something to think about.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
No, it's not.
no, it's not.
Further discussion on the amendment.
data.
We'll have data to follow, yeah.
To see what changes.
See how many people who,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Questions, discussion, anything
Yep.
further?
Get it
Does that
to
feel
us.
good for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll see.
All right, y'all, we have, yes.
Yeah.
First time in a while we've worked through something this, like,
We-
we did good. Okay, so, all right, seeing none on the amendment, Clerk Kalanga, please call the roll.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember D. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember J. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Sweet.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, so we have an amended resolution here. Any other discussion or changes or questions before we vote on the resolution as amended? All right. Clerk, oh, sorry, no. I'm sorry. We can't. I'm sorry. We can't. Clerk Kalanga, please call the roll.
This is the motion with the three amendments.
Yes, with the amended resolution.
2 amendments, yep.
Two amendments. 3 changes, 2 amendments.
Yep. Councilmember D. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember J. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Sweet,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Councilmember Tucson, you have our next resolution.
I indeed do. Resolution number 2023-014, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the minutes of January 24th, 2023 City Council meeting be approved, and I so move.
Been moved and supported. Clerk Kalanga, please call the roll.
Councilmember J. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Sweet,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember D. Simmons.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Councilmember J. Simmons, you have our next resolution.
Yes, resolution number 2023-015, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas public entities return to in-person meetings beginning on January 1st of 2022. And whereas at the time, the Delta variant, a very contagious form of COVID-19, was widely spreading throughout Washtenaw County, and whereas in an attempt to hold meetings as safe as possible, City Council continued to provide a virtual presence for its meetings and for all city board and commissions, as well as approving resolution number 2022-001A, which required face masks for all those in attendance, and whereas the CDC currently rates Washtenaw County's community level at low risk of infection for COVID-19, and cases have been minimal in the county since July of this past year, and whereas widely available vaccines and boosters combat the risk of transmission of COVID-19 and are the greatest defense against exposure, now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Ypsilanti hereby rescinds resolution number 2022-001A and removes the mask requirement for public meetings. I so move.
Support.
Been moved and supported. All right. Councilmember Simmons, you asked that it be brought back. Do you have anything you want to say?
No, actually, it's myself and Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen. Just thought it was time to, take another look at this since it's been a while.
All right. Discussion or questions from council?
So just a couple of quick things about this. I wanted to just say, one is, so I know when looking at the community levels, we've had some things where we've been like behind, right, in different times, like our health department, and in terms of the numbers. So like we were at like maybe medium or something in like December, but that was high. Like everybody I knew had COVID. And then it kind of came forward, the CDC, it was like, yeah, we were behind in some of that. So I just want to raise that, as sometimes our numbers are not necessarily up to date in terms of where we actually are in this moment. The other thing I just wanted to say too with this resolution is that, and I recognize that the city's committed to a remote ways of commenting and things of that sort, but I just wasn't sure if that's somewhere else, because in this resolution, it's not just, it doesn't only focus on face masks, it also has other things in terms of mechanism for public comment remotely without entering City Hall, and ways to watch the live feed and provide comment and things as well. So I just want to make sure that that doesn't necessarily go
remove
away
that?
just
Oh.
because we're rescinding, you know, we take away this resolution.
And so this would not be removing our virtual access or anything like that. It would just be the face mask requirement. Any other discussion or Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I wanted to bring this forward because I've noticed that the last several months of meetings that not everybody complied with this. And people sitting up here on the dais were complied, but people, staff and people in the audience were not complying at all. And this really pertains to everybody in this room. And so the question is, you know, we've been comfortable with people sitting out there without masks on. You know, do we need to rethink this? I have mixed feelings about this myself, actually, but you know, that's it.
I think I agree with Mayor Pro Tem. I mean, I have mixed feelings about this. I mean, but as I think about where the other spaces that I've traversed, it's like there are spaces that I don't even think about putting one on, and there are places that I absolutely wear one when I go inside. And so it kind of just depends on like comfort level, you know, the amount of people, all that going forward. So I don't really, I mean, I guess I'm not for or against this, honestly. I just think we need to be as safe as possible. And yeah, I'll just stop. I was gonna say something else, but I'm not gonna say it. But yeah, being as safe as possible. So, I mean, Councilmember Simmons, Jason.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, and that's fine, whatever way we go. It doesn't bother me wearing a mask in any way, shape, or form. But I also think, right, this has been, you know, it's become optional in many spaces, which is fine. I think if we decide that we're not going to get rid of this, then it does need to be consistent we need to hold that expectation that we've set, that everyone's gonna wear them that's in this space and in our other spaces as well. So just, you know, something to consider if we want to enforce that for all. Because by rescinding this, you know, it's still an option for anyone to wear it.
At any time, yeah.
At any time that they want or they feel comfortable. And of course, I would hope that folks, you know, aren't feeling well or whatever, they would not be in attendance, but out of an abundance of caution, they, you know, would wear a mask, I guess, if there was any questions. But yeah, so anyway,
Yeah, I agree.
my feelings won't be hurt either way.
All right. Anything else from council? Discussion, comments, questions? All right, well, seeing none, Clerk Owen.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Sweet,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember D. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember J. Simmons.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen, you have the next resolution. Does this start like tomorrow? Right now, I can take it off. Okay. I feel like everyone's gonna be like,
Just so I can
I'm
read-
like,
just so I can
throw it. Woo. All right.
Woohoo! Party face.
I know it's hot. I know it's kind of hot sometimes, you know. So.
Resolution number 2023-016, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas in January of 2023, the City Council engaged in goal setting and budget prioritization exercises with the valuable assistance from facilitator Sharonda Simmons and City Administration, and whereas Ms. Simmons prepared 5 strategic goals with outlines the results of the City Council's goal-setting sessions, and whereas during the 3 goal session meetings, City Council, City Administration, and the facilitator developed 5 strategic goals. Strategic Goal 1, retain and attract staff. Retain and attract staff by ensuring they have the tools necessary to do their jobs well and by providing performance incentives. Strategic Goal 2, community mental health. Identify community partnerships to achieve the goal of a regional non-emergency response plan and facilitate the creation of a response team. Strategic Goal 3, community engagement. engage our residents through commissions, neighborhood hubs, communications, outreach tools, events, and activities to sustain our community. Strategic Goal 4, invest in infrastructure. Invest in infrastructure to enhance community pride and ensure those that live, play, and work may do so safely. Strategic Goal 5, revenue generation and housing. Generate revenue to provide adequate city services and examine different housing opportunities to meet the multi-generational need and economic need equitably. Whereas pursuant to Section 5.02 of the Ypsilanti City Charter, the City Council desires to adopt goals, objectives, and budget priorities for 2022-2023 to provide the necessary direction to the city manager for allocation of resources for fiscal year 2022-23. Proposed budgets, now therefore be it resolved by the City of Ypsilanti that the Ypsilanti City Council does hereby adopt the Ypsilanti City Council 2022-2023 goal setting report as the City Council's goals, objectives, and budget priorities for fiscal year 2022 and 2023. Be it further resolved that the Ypsilanti City Council does hereby direct the city manager to consider these adopted goals and objectives as priorities during the preparation of the fiscal year 2022-23 budget in accordance with Section 5.02 of the Ypsilanti City Charter, and I so move.
Support.
Moved and supported. A discussion on our goals. We had such a fun time. Clerk Kalanga, please call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Sweet,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember D. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember J. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember King.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Councilmember Sweet, you have our next resolution.
Resolution number 2023-017, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the collection of curbside recycling and yard waste is an ongoing and important service offered to residents in the City of Ypsilanti, and whereas an environmental dump truck is vital to necessarily collect recycling and yard waste, and whereas the City Council of the City of Ypsilanti has allocated funds in the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget for this purchase, and whereas the purchase price of the vehicle is more than the originally budgeted amount. Whereas the remainder of the purchase price can be drawn from current year environmental motor pool capital, now therefore be it resolved that the City of Ypsilanti approves a purchase from Wolverine Freightliner Eastside Incorporated in the amount totaling $355,845 to be expended from the appropriate environmental motor pool capital accounts, with any change orders to be approved by the city manager, and I so move.
Support.
Moved and supported. Hello, Director Wessler.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, Mayor Brown. I'm mainly here to answer questions. It's not often I bring a $350,000 truck before you all, and I thought I should make myself available. There are some excellent pictures of the chassis in the packet. That particular chassis was chosen for its safety for our workers, since they do get in and out of the cab several times per day. It allows them to do so rather more safely than a lot of other chassis on the market. That's really the coolest thing about this truck. It is still a rear load truck, not an automated sidearm loader. That's to allow us a lot of versatility. In the future, we had a lot of internal debate over the automated sidearm, and went with the rear loader with cart tippers, as well as a winch, in case.
There's a winch.
This is a reeving winch, so it's good.
All right, great. Questions? Councilmember D. Simmons, I'm sorry, I couldn't see your hand.
My one quick question, which is just, so it says that, so this is coming, the difference is coming out of this year's
Yes.
budget. And I'm just wondering whether that is going to set up something else that we can't get this year, or no, is it kind of just like?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
Does this have, listen, I don't know anything about these trucks. Does this have anything, does it make it easier for the new, like, does it have anything to do with the new recycling thingies that we're gonna get?
So it has two cart tippers on the back of it. And so the cart tippers are essentially hooks that go on the back of the truck. They're bright yellow. 2 of our 3 trucks currently have them. And so those tippers catch the metal bar that are on the new carts to lift them up. So it's not just our people up there with 96-gallon.
That's what I was, okay, so it will help with that, okay.
Yep. And so the truck that this one will replace presumably does not have those tippers on it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Very excited about these new recycling bins.
We are too.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. Further questions?
Just a comment that somewhere in there, it mentioned that by deferring this from when it was originally proposed, the price has now gone up.
So, yes, we initially placed an order in mid-2020 for a vehicle that would replace 609, the vehicle that doesn't have the cart tippers, that is pre-2007. The truck that arrived late September and was not the truck that we thought we were ordering. So that order was canceled. So that was a bit of a production, and here we are. This is the chassis that fits our needs that's available, and with the body that fits our needs that's available.
I thought it was canceled for other reasons. I didn't-
No.
That was it.
No, it was, we took a look at it and realized it would probably cost us more in workman's comp than for the vehicle itself.
All right, well, thank you. Any other comments or discussion or questions for Bonnie? All right, seeing none, Clerk Kalinga, please call the roll. Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Sweet,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember D. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember J. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Councilmember Tucson, you have our next resolution.
Resolution number 2023-018, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the city seeks to provide executive director and administrative services to the Ypsilanti DDA, and whereas the Ypsilanti DDA seeks to enter into an administrative services contract for the services of the city, and whereas the City of Ypsilanti approves of the use of city staff for a 24-month contract for services to the Ypsilanti DDA with compensation, and now therefore be it resolved that the Ypsilanti City Council directs the mayor and city clerk to enter the administrative services contract as provided for 24 months to staff the executive director and administrative services of the Ypsilanti Downtown Development Authority, and I so move.
Moved and supported. Who's going to talk to us about this? City manager?
I'll start off talking and then Christopher can jump in if he'd like. So the city has had a contract with DDA since 2016. And so throughout this time, we've been able to evaluate and see what works and what doesn't, what we need to fine tune. And so I had a meeting with the executive committee, and there were some things that they would have liked to see changed and made smoother. So this pretty much just includes those. And I guess I can tell you what the changes are. This agreement allows DPS to do some things, and it allows a mechanism for them to charge for it, because it wasn't included before. It also allows for annual evaluations, and also a process for doing that, because we've actually had to come back to council last year, I think you guys remember, to amend the budget to allow them to give raises. So this would allow us to work together on an evaluation process, and then to also include this in their budget, because their budget is being increased. So, and we'll find a maximum. They hit it, they do, if they don't, but it gives us a way to not have to keep coming back here. Also, it would give the authority to me to give out the stipend, or the amount that would be paid to our staff extra, because right now it was being decided by a staff person who's also a part of that stipend, so they're deciding theirs as well, and that is a conflict. actually, after looking at it, I was trying to determine the duties, like how it was determined, how they got that much or whatever. And I'll know because I'm gonna get down to it and find out how they're being distributed and actually who is getting them and who should or should not, because there's been a significant change from when the contract was first signed. It was, more people. And now it's less people, but I don't know what they're doing and if other people should be added. Okay, so maybe that was too much information. And so we're going to get an extension. This is going to give us a two-year extension to 2025. And as I said, we're going to increase the cost to $60,000. So those are the changes.
Questions from council or discussion? Thumbs up or, okay, Councilmember
Just quick question. When you were talking about the review, just in my mind, because we just were going through this our last meeting. So, all right, for the DDA, so for the staff, so they would be going through an evaluation through the DDA and not with the city process, or?
So basically, they have been granting bonuses. We have not been a part of their process for evaluating. And so we want to work together so that, like, they wanted to give a huge amount. So if we know in advance what they're planning to do, and we know what we're planning to do, we can be on the same page as far as, what we decide on. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, but the staff goes through a separate evaluation process. So it's outside of the city process.
I'm not sure. I've never seen anything from DDA. Christopher can answer to that, but they do make recommendations, based on their performance. So I'm assuming they do something.
There was an evaluation process with the DDA.
Okay.
For the staff from the city that worked for the DDA. So there was a separate evaluation than what the city manager or the department head would be doing with their staff at the city. In addition to, so there's two. They have one at the city and then one with the DDA.
Oh, okay. So they are part of the process that we have.
Yes.
But then they were also going through another process, and that's then was an additional stipend. Is that what you're talking about for
Bonus.
that?
Yeah, for the DDA, yes.
From the DDA for that work.
Yeah, so we want to make it a little bit cleaner. Not to say that we want to take anything from anyone, but we want to make it a little bit cleaner, I should say, so that we're in agreement, because someone could end up getting to 20%, But we are charged with this agreement to administer, this and to be on one accord when we do it. So I think this is going to be a good marriage for us to at least be involved in their process.
It's not a thumb up. It's.
I know, I was like,
There's
I
many
wasn't
fingers
sure.
up
I didn't
now.
know. Last time it was a
I'm not gonna
thumb.
do that anymore.
Okay, all right.
I just want to say I appreciate the work you did on this, city manager. And I think the key thing for me is the second sentence in the scope of work, and that it takes it out of that bonus-oriented compensation from the DDA and puts it into the structure for the overall for the city, and gives you that authority to work that in. It says they may authorize it, but it still comes to you for approval. And I was looking at scenarios in which, I'm not saying this about our current DDA director, but somebody who would be doing excellent work for the DDA and slacking for the other part of their job. And then they would get this big bonus, and you would be going, oh, wait a minute, why are these people getting such huge bonuses when, they're not really up to snuff here? So I like that a lot. And so I think this is great. I think this is a really good way to incorporate that.
So for me, as someone who sits on the DDA as well, I would so city manager, like, let's say next year, is this saying that the evaluation process would happen together? rather than two separate processes like we did this year? Or Christopher, can you answer that maybe? I don't.
No, actually, I'm asking them to predetermine their ceiling for what their raise would be. And so that would automatically be included in their budget because they haven't done that. It's kind of like an afterthought.
So you're saying ahead of time, let it be known like how much they would be planning to
Right.
give as bonuses, so that way we don't have to come back to it later.
Absolutely,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
We don't have to come back here.
Right, okay. Because I think that was the confusion around having to come back and get it approved by council because it had to be an amendment to the budget.
Right, right. And so they would have a standard, of course, if they said 10,000, if they got a 5, you know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
It's this much, that much.
But it would already be there and then, okay, yes, thank you. Okay.
And then we're not penalizing
Right.
this employee.
Mhm. That's all I want. So, did you have anything you wanted to add about this or?
Did a great job going through the changes, and I really appreciate her and the executive committee working out some things to remove a conflict of interest and smooth out some of the stuff that prior year's agreements didn't quite get right.
Thank you. All right, anything further from council? Seeing none, Clerk Kalinga.
Councilmember Sweet,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember D. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember J. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you so much for your work on the city manager and we do have G, yes. And so our next, I guess, resolution will be the motion to reconsider.
It'll be a motion to reconsider with the second, then you would vote on the reconsidering, and then the motion would, the original resolution would be on the table.
Okay. So it would have to be,
So I would just say a motion to reconsider Francis McMullen.
and the
Is that,
raise.
2023-011B.
And I second.
All right. Is there, do we just vote? All right, thank you.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember D. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember J. Simmons.
Yes.
Councilmember King,
yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Sure.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Sweet.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Motion is on the table.
Okay, now it's on the table and now it's back open for discussion. All right, discussion.
So I personally wanted to reconsider because after the information that we received, I'm assuming everybody received it in email, I didn't see where it didn't seem fair. That's how I feel. It didn't seem fair. I didn't see where Ms. McMullen had to come back and provide this information that was stated in the last meeting. And in my opinion, if that was one of the requests, I would say we should have tabled it and gave her an opportunity to provide that information.
I'm not sure what information we're talking about.
Well, I think, Steve, it was a document or something, it was a report or something that I think you stated that Francis McMullen was supposed to report back with.
It was a process.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the raises. Yeah.
Were you done, Councilmember King?
I am.
Okay, Councilmember D. Simmons.
So, and I'm trying to pull this up. But one of the things that I was just looking at is so in the with the policy, one thing that I would maybe want to change or adjust from the original motion is based on the policy that was put forward to change the percentage from 3% to 2%, because that seems to be in line with what the policy is, and also in terms of thinking about how the money was allocated, since it was allocated as a lump sum amount that then all of the performance-based raises will come out of, that
the way I'm thinking about it is that that it would allow for more money to be available to reach further into our staffing personnel, because obviously the percentages are a lot for when you're at the, you know, the top of the income bracket for the city. And so that would allow more to go further. So that would be my amendment.
Are you putting forward a motion right now to amend?
I got a question. I just have a question.
Well, I'm sorry, give me one
Okay.
sec. Is that a,
Yeah, that would be an amendment, a motion to amend the original.
So is this I just need clarification. When you said change the compensation of the policy, are you talking about to change the amount of the raise or to change the compensation policy?
Change the amount of the raise. So what was in there was 3%, and then
two?
yeah. So I'm saying to change it from the policy, I think is good. I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not changing the policy. I was just looking through based on the policy, and so I was just making that change from 3% to 2% based on what was in the original motion.
Okay. When you say policy, I'm kind of confused.
I'm saying based on the policy that you put forward. I was just looking at this.
Okay.
Is there a
Says-
second for the motion, for the amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Now we can discuss it because we shouldn't be discussing it before a second.
Sorry. I was trying to get a little clarification.
Anything further, Councilmember D. Simmons? And then
I'll just say, yeah, so I'm looking at this, so it's like employees meeting expectations, 2%, employees performing above expectations, 2%. So that's where I'm pulling in these
Got it.
numbers. And I had, you know, mathed it out before in terms of what that would equal based on the 2022 pay that was in our materials.
Oh, so you're using the policy that City Manager McMullen sent us about compensation going forward, you're going back and using that as your rationale for the range, for the percentage?
Yes, because this would have been the policy that would have been for 2022.
Correct. Okay, I got you.
And just okay.
Uh,
I just, never mind. I just got to go back and look at that to see if I said that that's how it's going to be, or if I use it as an example. I wrote it. I just did it like, got it right off that night. Like, let me put what's in my head on paper.
Any discussion on the amendment, which is to move it to 2%? Yeah. All right, seeing none, Clerk Kalanga?
Councilmember D. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember J. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
No.
Councilmember Sweet,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
No.
motion carries with 5 yes, 2 no's.
Okay, so now the resolution on the table is amended. So it is the approval of a merit increase for the city manager at 2%. Mayor Pro Tem?
So, the discussion at the last meeting centered around the policy that was there, but there were other reasons that I voted against giving the city manager a raise. And I stated those reasons in my evaluation. And it was not a favorable evaluation at all. I was very critical of the city manager, and that was done in a closed session. So I didn't feel like I could bring those issues up in an open session to do that, out of respect for that closed session. But I did not give her a favorable review at all. And so the wording in that I found kind of strange, because I didn't feel that there was, I was confused at the time why no other council person was bringing up those issues during that evaluation. And that went through, and everybody, gave the evaluation they gave, the numbers are there. But in my comments, I specifically stated several reasons why I was not in favor of giving that raise. And there were significant reasons of policy and overreach on the part of the city manager. And so that's why I wasn't, the discussion last time got really convoluted, and it really wasn't the issue for me. The issue for me was those things that I put in the evaluation that were really unfavorable and cost the city a significant amount of money because of those actions.
Well, I think these comments should be made in closed session, because I don't want to get back to what we did last time, because we did have a closed session to discuss those items. And that item that you mentioned last time was not brought up in closed session, because you were quiet, so.
Because it was in my written evaluation.
Okay, but I would think that would have been the time for you to say that, and you didn't say it at all. You didn't give clarification or anything.
Because it was written in.
So again, I think we should discuss this in closed session if we needed to.
And what I don't
'Cause
want to
that's
do
the
is have,
proper place.
what I don't want to do is have a back and forth about that right now. Because we could go into closed session if that's the discussion that you all want to have. It's a personnel issue, or a conversation about personnel. But we are talking about giving an increase of 2% or not. D. Simmons.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. And I don't know whether we would need to go. I mean, I will say this is a large part of why I originally abstained from these votes, is because looking at the evaluations, obviously there's a lot of things that went into the numbers and then also the comments. And some of those comments are things that, I was not privy to. And so that is a big reason why I abstained, because looking at those numbers, looking at the evaluation, I could see that there was some inconsistencies, and I have no way of understanding what those are based on, because I wasn't part of those closed session conversations. And so I just want to name that was definitely a big reason for my abstention. And the bringing this back is more in relation to the sense, the fairness that Councilmember King was mentioning. And so some of that got put because of what that conversation was in our last meeting. So I can definitely appreciate this idea that there is more information and there were bigger, different reasons that we did not, council members who were not here were not a part of. I don't know whether it would, yeah. So anyway, so I'm just laying that out.
Yeah.
And knowing that if we need to go into that, then we would need to go into a closed session.
I think what I would also add to that, and I appreciate your feedback, Councilmember Simmons, is that, again, the accountability piece is if we had done this in a timely fashion, you all who are new would not have had to be a part of this conversation in this way.
Yeah, so that's what I'm
so
saying.
that is on the folks who were here, myself included, that we did not, as a group, have our stuff together and get it done on time. And I am one of those people, right, who was late turning in my evaluation. So again, I think for me, I will say that some of this, it's our own fault, right? The collective we. And so I would like for us to just move it forward in whatever way we're going to, so that we can put this to bed and do better going forward. Is there anything further from council? All right. Clerk Kalanga, please call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
No.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Sweet,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember D. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember J. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember King.
Yes.
Motion carries with 6 yes, 1 no.
Thank you all. Next, we have nominations for boards and commissions. We have Aaron Seagraves, whose term will expire in 2026. I would think, yep.
Yeah, I'd like to motion to suspend the
I was gonna
rules
say, yeah.
so that Aaron can attend the meeting, which is this coming Thursday, as this is a reappointment.
Thank you. So you can move to, you can just move to reappoint him right now.
Move to reappoint Aaron Seagraves to the Arts Commission.
Support. It's been moved and seconded. Any questions, discussion? Clerk Kalanga, please call the roll.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Sweet,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson, Councilmember D. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember J. Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Boards and commission liaison reports. YPAC.
All right, so for YPAC, we met a little while ago. The date is escaping me, unfortunately. I'm sorry, but we did not meet quorum.
Oh,
So, yeah.
wow. Okay. Thank you. HRC. Oh, go ahead.
Right, no update.
Arts Commission.
I have yet to attend a meeting. I'll be attending the one on Thursday. I have met with the chair to get kind of brought up to speed, so I hope to have more true report in the future.
Thank you. Parks and Rec.
They have not met in 2023. Their first meeting is at the end of this month, and I'll report out after that.
Awesome. Sustainability.
We have our next meeting next week. Have been meeting with the chair and other members talking about potential grant opportunities for the city.
Wonderful. HDC. Planning Commission.
I have not met since our last meeting, but there will be two text amendments that will be coming before council.
Thank you. ZBA.
Nothing to report. I don't think they've met, so. Okay.
SEMCOG.
No update at this time.
What?
We did not have a meeting in January. I do see one on the books for next week, but I haven't received any updates, so, may or may not happen. But I think it's gonna happen.
Okay. Urban County. So I have been attending these meetings. I even went through a training last week to learn exactly what the Urban County does, who's a part of it. There are actually one or two new communities who are going to be joining the Urban County. They also, they shared some information about the home rehab air conditioner assistance program. That waitlist is going to open up on February 21st. I will forward this out to council so that we can share widely with the community and our constituents and networks, so that we can have, our community members benefit from this. And it opens at noon on that day, the 21st. The program offers central air installations for eligible residents, but they have to have a documented medical need to be eligible for the assistance, and all the details are in the link once I send it out. And if folks have questions, there's the contact people and all of that, and all the information that they can contact at the county in OCED. And so this is the waitlist is a tool for folks who express their need, but it doesn't mean that they automatically have applied, for the program or anything like that. So making sure that if we do share this out, that we're clear about that. It's just to get on the wait list to apply. And yeah, I'll be at the next meeting next month. So, DDA. Well, we just did this tonight with the agreement. I think that clears up a lot of, some of the things that were some difficulty around our staff and their employment with the city versus the DDA. They've also been, I think we talked about this already, the contest?
Meeting next week.
Are we meeting next week already?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. All right, meeting next week.
Landscaping RFP is out until the end of February, and so we're trying to get companies on that.
Thank you, Christopher, because already, I'm like, man, I feel like we just met. Friends of Rutherford Pool.
They met this past week, kind of a nuts and bolts first of the year kind of meeting. The outstanding things are that they have to resurface the pool, and they're going to be in the next round of grant submission for that for Department of Natural Resources, but also that's a significant cost. The other cost that they're looking at that is accelerated is every year they hire a company to come out and open the pool, and that involves filling it and making sure that the chemistry is correct and doing all that. And in the past year, that vendor has become less cooperative and has increased their prices from $3,500 to $11,000 for doing that. And so that's another cost that they're seeing has escalated. So.
Thank you. Bicentennial Committee.
Attended my first bicentennial meeting last week. They are pretty much wrapping up with the bicentennial book that's being published. So they're and they have discussing logistics for several of the upcoming events. So I'll be kind of helping with logistics behind the scenes with them, and will be attending future meetings. And then they likely will have some either proposals or conversations to kind of get started with council soon about some ideas that they have as well. And some things around the city to do for the bicentennial year. And I think that's it for now.
Thank you. Council proposed business. I will start with Councilmember Tucson.
Nothing really much to report, nothing to bring up, but I would like to give acknowledgement that February is the month that we're in currently, and that it is Black History Month. So let's just bask in what that is, and take our time in examining the history that is Black history. Thank you.
Councilmember Jay Simmons. All right, thank you. Councilmember Sweet.
I had something, but I don't know if it's overlapping what you had already mentioned. Was your conversation about your urban county, was that in regards to the county's weatherization program, or is that kind of
This
separate?
was separate. That's separate than that, but
Okay, so I will give an update on that then real quick. So the county just increased their income limits for the weatherization program within OCED. It's around 80% AMI now, so that went from the $20,000 to $30,000 range for a single person to now in the $63,000 range for a single person to qualify. And then it increases from there. The threshold goes up. That change was effective the 24th of January. So this is a recent change. And they're expecting potentially another increase to those income limits in April, May timeframe as well. So if you know any residents that may qualify for a lot of their services are centered around insulation work, hot water inspections, replacements, things like that. They're not going to do a full roof replacement or large scale projects, but it's more energy saving type method projects that they do. I can send out a link to that webpage that can be shared with details. And then I know he's not here, but I'd just like to publicly thank our outgoing HR director, Dewan Fisher, for his service to the city, and wish him well in his future endeavors. I know his last day, I think, is next week. So, and kind of looking forward to bringing on and who will be the next director of human resources. So.
Thank you.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
I have no business except to say that I went and I took my tour of the yard for DPS. I got my bright orange hoodie, which is
You need to all wear those one day and match.
I don't
up
have
here.
mine yet.
You don't have your shit? Oh, you better.
4 days at home in that hoodie. So, but the tour, I'd done a tour with Ron Akers last year, and there were things that came up in this tour that really I hadn't seen before, such as the building with the collapsing roof, and the supports that are deteriorating, and part of that conversation with Director Wessler was also compensation and safety for staff. And I appreciate that a whole lot more now, being out there and having seen that. And I think this new truck will certainly address a lot of that as well. But as I think about budget and goals, that just reinforced that we have our own infrastructure, not just things that residents are encountering, but things that our employees are encountering, and that's a significant thing to keep in account. And whereas some of the other things that are on our budget could be funded through other means, there's really no intergovernmental money for those kinds of infrastructure problems. So.
Thank you. Councilmember D. Simmons.
You know it. Okay, so in no particular order, one thing I wanted to bring up, this is related to Hawk. So I had a resident and someone who's been working with a daytime warming center reach out, talking about a lot of the challenges with Hawk, which I know has come up before. This is the single point of entry for folks to receive access to resources and get out of homelessness. And so they talked about how it's not working. And you can try to get through, but you can be disconnected before you actually get to talk to anyone or leave a message, and trying to figure out what to do about this. And so I wanted to bring this forward, especially since we have the warming center and we are providing supports for our unhoused community here. And so one, I'm trying to get a sense of like, what is an update from Hawk? How can we figure out like what's going on and what their timeline is? The way I've heard it is that they were supposed to be doing some change to their phone system, but I don't know where that is. So I'm wondering if that's something that we can get through our staff that works with the warming center to help support that. And then the other question I have is around ways, if there's a way we can think about how we track how many people are actually unable to receive services due to the administrative and bureaucratic challenges with Hawk, because it's one of those things. I know in government, you can't actually do anything unless you have a number to say it's a problem. And so we know anecdotally that this is a problem. And so, I'd love to hear some suggestions around how we can actually be able to address some of these issues that are happening. So I don't know if anybody has thoughts about that. I guess I could just go through all of them. We can come back to them. Based on the CIL, I wanted to come back. So I'm going to probably send some things because Joe's not here, but I had a question about something that was included around kind of a map of different things that have maybe fines or, are waiting for inspection or things like that. I wanted to get a sense of whether this includes rental inspections and certificates of occupation, or what that would look like to do that. I also have questions about some of the variability in the data we saw from the police department, and around why the tickets went up in January when everything else went down in January, and kind of whether there is a correlation there. I wanted to say cheers to Bonnie for talking about the snow event, and naming that people in the community noticed. I saw people posting pictures on Facebook and such. So that's always great when we get accolades from people just for doing our job. So yay, thank you, DPS, making us look good. I want to just share that last month had my first ward meeting, and I want to share some updates and things around that, some ideas that came out of that around community engagement, some really great ideas. And so I'll be trying to write those up to include in the newsletter, so that can go out to everyone. And then also want to talk with Francis and Tom, our communications person, about an idea that came up from a resident. So I'll be in touch about that. And also hope to do a session over Zoom. And I wanted to check if there's issues or with that. So that was the question. I just wanted to share appreciation in general to staff. So I've been getting a lot of communications from residents, and I've been sending them along. So just general appreciation to staff for responding to these issues in speedy nature, and that I will continue to try to keep up with the residents. It's kind of hard. Next meeting, also to know, we're bringing forward a couple of resolutions in support of unions, as there's a lot of activity in that space. I also want to mention, and I'll probably share something somebody sent to me, some potential funding process that could help support right to counsel. So this is specifically for tenants, that a lot of people are going to court and they don't have representation. which privileges landlords almost always. And so one of the concerns about right to counsel is usually around funding in terms of being able to pay for counsel. So that's something, I just got it, but I just wanted to mention it in case other people are interested in this arena and would like to help support our tenants here. And then the last thing is a question for the group, which is, I know we've talked about the idea of some kind of civic engagement resource fair. And so I wanted to see if who would be interested in maybe meeting and sharing ideas to begin planning something like this, because I imagine it will take a while to plan. And so I wanted to see if anybody's interested in that.
Council, is there anyone to answer her question? Who's interested? Yes. Okay. Anybody else?
I definitely have. It just depends on
So I can't-
my time.
No, that's, you gotta know your.
Yeah, I'm at capacity at this point, but, okay. So we have 3 people. Well, Des, Michelle, and Michelle, sorry, and Steve. Okay. All right, Councilmember King, Michelle, I'm sorry, Michelle.
So first of all, I want to say thank you to Mr. Osler for coming tonight. I definitely, growing up in Ypsilanti, I definitely remember hearing your dad's song all the time. I look forward to going to the parade to just see him perform and hear him. So I look forward to working with you in some way to be able to recognize your father. And thanks for coming tonight. Also, as Roland said, it is Black History Month, so happy Black History Month to everybody. I look forward to celebrating. My question is, how do we recognize it as the city? Do we recognize Black History Month in any way? And you can answer at the end or now. Okay, okay. And so today I had an opportunity to present a proclamation. And in honor of Black History Month, I think it's wise that I read it tonight because she was a pioneer in the community. After learning more about her, I also learned that she worked with Maddie Dorsey. So Desiree presented that proclamation with me today. So I'm going to read half and she's going to read the other half. So Kitty Margaret Nee Taylor Wilson Hill, whereas the city of Ypsilanti wishes to acknowledge, honor, and pay tribute to Kitty M. Wilson, an exceptional individual who achieved great accomplishments in her life. And whereas the city's motto is pride, diversity, and heritage, and it is our honor to recognize Kitty who served the community. Whereas Kitty was born on July 1st, 1934 to the late Alex Lewis Sr. and Eva Nee Joyner Taylor in Brownsville, Tennessee. And whereas upon her mother's death, Kitty moved to Ypsilanti and attended Ypsilanti Public Schools, where she graduated from Ypsilanti High. And whereas after some time, Kitty returned to Ypsilanti with her 2 young children. There she attended Washtenaw Community College and began working at the University of Michigan Hospital and for the state of Michigan.
And whereas Kitty attended a political rally in Detroit for former President Jimmy Carter, who encouraged her to get involved to help her community, Kitty took that advice and ran for the Ypsilanti City Council and was elected, serving from May 6, 1991 until April 13, 1992. Following her political service, she formed the nonprofit housing organization, People's Hope for Housing Incorporated, to rehabilitate homes and help low-income citizens achieve property ownership. And whereas as much as she is loved, she is missed by those who cherish her memory, including her beloved sons, Wayne and Lamonte of Ypsilanti, Michigan, grandchildren Lamonte II, Jalen Lamonte III, Jada, Lamaya, Desmond, Amante, and Amari, and 7 great-grandchildren. 1 great-grandchild, Zinnia, preceded her passing. 1 sister-in-law, Elizabeth Taylor of San Bernardino, California, and many nieces, nephews, grandnieces, grandnephews, cousins, and loving friends. Now, therefore, I, Michelle King, and Desiree Simmons, City Council members, on behalf of the city, present this proclamation to honor the memory of Kitty M. Wilson.
And again, thanks for allowing us to read that. I think this is the perfect month to honor a pioneer in our community. And I was honored with Desiree to be there today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for representing the city and doing that.
Thank you.
You say her full name is Kitty?
Let me just read
I
it.
know, because there was like four. She has four names.
Kitty Margaret Nee Taylor Wilson Hill.
Great.
And so again, from conversations I've had with other residents, she also worked with Maddie Dorsey. So that was, good to hear because it is a name that we are familiar with.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Oh yeah. My turn. Okay. Well, yes. We will have a proclamation coming for Black History Month at the next meeting. I wrote something in the newsletter and then didn't submit it for the meeting today. So, it's great. So I'll have that at our next meeting. There's going to be just a lot of things happening in the community. There are a guest lecture series happening at Eastern in the Africology and African American Studies Department, where they're having individuals come in and speak and lecture throughout this month. Things happening, of course, within our school districts, within just all over the community, to be honest. And so just please be on the lookout. Hopefully some of those things can be loaded up onto our calendar, as we were talking about when we were trying to move in our recreation and community events to our calendar to make sure that people have access to that information, what's happening around. And if any of you have any things that are going on or that come up, please share it so we can share it out with our community members. I was listening to your proclamation and I had a whole nother thing I was gonna say. I don't know what it was anymore. But also this coming Sunday, the Ypsilanti Symphony Orchestra is gonna have their next performance. And so I don't have the exact time, but it happens out at Lincoln Consolidated Schools. And so if folks are interested in attending that, I attended the last one I think it was in December. It was the Christmas concert and it was so much fun and it was great, especially if you're interested in like orchestra or live music. So I encourage you to attend and support because we do have some local residents who participate in the orchestra. That's it for now, because I'm not going to go through my email and look for this at this point. Remarks from the city manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I got two things I want to talk about. Well, actually, three. The first one is the marijuana appeals. To kind of give you prep a little bit about those. It's going to be on February 28th. And so far we have five appeals. And the reason these are being appealed is because I denied them. And I denied them based on the ordinance. And I did not want to have to establish a policy for how I choose, who has shown good faith and who hasn't. I think I learned my lesson with that. Right, Mayor Pro Tem? So this is coming to City Council to decide based upon their application, what they say in their appeal, and you guys will make the decision on each one, whether we should approve them. So that is pretty much what I wanted to put in your head. So if you could please look at the memo. The memo right now is outdated because at the time there was only like three.
There's only three of them.
Yeah, so now we have five. And feel free to ask me any questions, prior to. We're going to use the same process that we used before for appeals. If you got any procedural questions, Mr. Barr is the one to see. So February 28th.
Is there a reason why that date was chosen? Like, why is it at the end of the month or not? Is it, do they need a certain amount of lead up time before we have that?
No, Andrew just chose the next date, I think.
It's based on council has to respond 30 days after the appeal. The first appeal was filed January 30th.
Oh, okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I forgot that.
That's an available Tuesday.
Yeah.
The HDC
Can I ask you a question about that?
Mm-hmm.
Did I see in notes from the DDA that they were supporting one of the appellants?
Yes.
That they were supporting one of the,
One of the appeals.
maybe. Is it the Farm Bureau one?
They passed a resolution supporting 705 West Cross.
Yeah.
Worst bar.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, they'll get a chance to make their case. Many of them were awarded permits, and it's been a long time. And they didn't do what they stated they were going to do in the amount of time that they said they were going to do. So I only cited one basic, basic violation, and that was of the 120 days, because they should have been open by now, according to what they said they were going to do in their application.
And you said it would be the same process? What's the process?
Mr. Barr, you want to give a little bit of overview? That's just that we heard their case and we deliberated.
I sent a memo out at the last time, and this is from memory, but the appellants have the right to due process, and that means they have to be notified of the claim and then have a right to respond and have a hearing. And so there's nothing in the charter or the city ordinance that sets out the exact procedure. So I suggested that we do it similar to an administrative law hearing. And that would be that the staff would present the case and the reason for the denial of the appeal. Then the appellant would have a chance to respond and indicate what they wanted for the appeal. There would be a chance of rebuttal, and then the council would consider it and then make a decision. And I presented a proposed language for the decision to either agree to the appeal or deny it, and the reasons for the denial. And I can send out a memo with that same language so that you'll be well prepared on the structure of the process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That meeting will start at 7?
To be determined.
One other, I have two other things. One other thing is the Black history. When you said that, the mayor did speak to that. In the past, the mayor was in charge of deciding how we would do it. And so we did a Zoom because we were in the pandemic. But the city itself hasn't sponsored anything other than that Zoom thing, correct?
Well, that was not something that was like in the office of the mayor. The mayor at the time made a decision to have an event. And that is what she wanted to do. So there's nothing that is written in stone as to what the city does or what council does as a group. It could be anyone. It doesn't have to be the mayor. We could come together and come up with something if you wanted to do something as council or as as the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. So my third comment was, we have some development opportunities for Water Street. And so in the past, I believe, well, I don't really know how council was informed about it until they present it to council. But I've suggested that we have a work session where staff is able to talk to you and answer questions rather than staff just going to each person, telling them about the project. That we have a work session where we're able to all hear the same thing, all be able to make questions so that when they come to us, we're all fully aware of what the proposal is, and we've talked about it. And so that's something I'm going to implement for all of our developments, sort of like, Water Street rather, which is a major one, because we actually have two people, two competing, right, so when it's multiple. And so then you'll have to make that final, decision on which one you prefer, so. And so we do have one coming up probably at our next meeting. I mean, no, we had, I'm sorry, because we haven't had our work session. I just talked about this to Joe. We're going to be reaching out to you about the work session date, and then one will follow right after.
that, okay.
Yeah. So that's all I'll talk about for now. I would like to update you that I have, I did do the merit rate raise increases. And according to the compensation study, those receiving them did receive notification and according to the policy. And so you're welcome. That's it.
All right. Now is our second opportunity for public comment.
I do have one communication.
Oh, communication, sorry.
More of a question. So there's an attorney general of opinion from the late 90s that advisory committees aren't actually subject to the Open Meetings Act. There was a resolution passed, I want to say 2010, where council determined to have all committees subject to the Open Meetings Act. But we've talked about this before, and if that's something that you want Mr. Bart and I to look into to change the legislation so those bodies can meet informally and then forward information to the staff liaison to take to council, so they can meet online, they can meet in other places, they wouldn't be subject to the open meeting.
I would
If that's something you want us to look into, we can. If not, then let's leave it the way it is.
The Attorney General's opinion was based on the fact that our committees are just advisory. They don't they don't have any real power to do things. And so that the Attorney General felt that therefore they weren't subject to the Open Meetings Act, which I agree with.
I would like to see information on that so we can make a determination. Everybody else? Okay. All right. Thank you. And my apologies, I'm zooming through. All right. This is our second opportunity for public comment. So would you like to address council again? No? Or is there anyone online who would like to address council?
If anyone participating virtually would like to make comment, please raise your hand, and you have 3 minutes to address council. Seeing no hands raised, I'll give it back to you, Mayor.
Well, thanks everyone for a very interesting meeting. The meeting is now adjourned. Right on time. That's all right.
Ask her.
I'm surprised.